and political commentator. Russell Quirk is joining us today.
Good morning. Glad to be back.
It's always lovely to see you.
It's been a while. It has
been a while. Well,
here I am.
There was that petition.
There was, yes, and the Ofcom thing. I still exist. Here I am.
Here he is. I'm sure we're all delighted. Send your message of support in. We're delighted to have Russell back in the studio. Russell, let's talk about the U-turn on winter fuel. The economy's been sorted now, and that's why they can afford to give winter fuel payments back to millions of pensioners they took it away from last winter. Fair enough, yeah?
No.
Okay, just
because that, I'm afraid, is another Labour lie. Would you believe?
Politicians lying.
And we're kind of losing count of those Labour lies, I think. And let's not forget that even before the election, and certainly for the weeks and months after the election, Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer made great stock of the fact there was this huge £22 billion black hole left by the Conservatives, which, of course, the Office of Budget Responsibility could not find. Odd, that.
They looked.
They looked, can't find it. Rachel Reeves is still referring to it. I think in her speech yesterday she mentioned it about 11 times. And despite that apparent black hole, she has now gone ahead and made it even more gaping, I suppose, logically, by rescinding this humiliating U-turn on the winter fuel allowance, but not least the fact that, of course, this Labour government are spending and spending and spending.
They have interesting priorities, don't they? Now, I think there's a perfectly good argument for, high-earning pensioners with loads and loads of savings not to be getting 300 quid from other hard-working taxpayers who are struggling to pay their bills for childcare, put food on the table, put fuel in the car, to get to pay their heating bills. I think that's a perfectly reasonable argument.
Yep.
And for years I've been saying I don't think the winter fuel payment should be a one-off £300 payment. Here you are, beneficence of the Chancellor. Here you are, your £300 to pay your heating bill. I think it's humiliating. I think it's demeaning. It should be part of the pension. We have one of the lowest state pensions in the world. Now, there's lots of different in Europe, so there are different reasons for that in terms of how payments are made. However, it was always possible to do a version of means testing at the top end, because if you're paying a certain rate of tax, then you're not going to get it. But that's actually quite a small number of people. I mean, 3/4 of pensioners will now be getting the winter fuel allowance. Question is, should she apologise? There was no sense of, you know what, we did the wrong thing. It was wrong. We've listened. They did a little bit of we listened, but mostly it was all about the economy's fine now.
If only for some humility in politics. I mean, an apology from a politician is literally as rare as a hen's tooth, isn't it? It just doesn't happen. But it'd be nice to hear every now and again, I think. This is clearly not just something that affected pensioners. I mean, we have gone through a winter, of course, where that winter fuel allowance was removed. It was, I think, verging on evil. I mean, I think it was, quite frankly, an atrocious thing to do. But let's be clear as well that when it was, I was going to get to that, yeah. So when it was first introduced, you could argue that it was political because it was designed to appease, if you like, and to gather more votes from pensioners.
It wasn't. It was really clear at the time.
But to do the opposite now and to alienate.
Pensioners don't vote for us; they vote Tory. We don't care if we.
But that's why they took it away. Yes.
That's what it was.
And of course, there's been a huge backlash. So the excuse, the fib, the lie, the deceit that this U-turn is as a consequence of the economy being fixed, and you just referred to the unemployment numbers, as I'm sure we'll get to later on. This economy is far from being fixed. There is only one reason why they have U-turned in a humiliating way on the winter fuel allowance, and that is because the polls are destroying
exactly. But the thing is, we were told that axing the universal winter fuel payments would raise £1.5 billion this year. Now it looks like the figures are revised figures from the Treasury state the policy would still raise £450 million. But Steve Webb, who's a former pensions minister, and he says actually he's done some work numbers. He says it will raise just £250 million. Bearing in mind that £1.5 billion has already been spent on other things.
And let's be clear what the total budget of this government, this country is. Our money, of course. Let's remind ourselves it's not the government's money. It is our money. Taxpayers' money. Is about £900 billion. So this risk, this political faux pas was done in exchange for saving what is actually a tiny amount of money in the scheme of things. It was a real political shooting in the foot.
Well, I mean, again, everything is absolutely fine, and the economy is all sorted. They've got us all back on, even keel. Everyone is feeling. I don't know about you. You go to the supermarket, everything's fine. So inflation going up and unemployment going up. Now, the UK's jobless rate was announced again this morning, 7 o'clock. The regular figures. These are the figures for the 3 months to April. The new unemployment rate is up from 4.5%. That's 1.6 million people to 4.6 Now, it's a tiny increase. You think, oh, what difference does that make? It's the highest rate since July 2021, when we'd just come out of, the second big lockdown. That is very worrying. Now, compared to, France and many other countries, it is not, at the scary end, but it is creeping up and up. And I think what's also crucial is Jamie Jenkins, brilliant statistician, big friend of the show. He was quoted in the Sun front page yesterday for some of his latest figures on. You look at the cost of asylum hotels. That was it 4.6 billion or something. It's equivalent of the tax paid by everyone in Manchester, or the population. Even if everyone in Manchester, the children and the pensioners all pay tax, it would be all their tax. But he was a statistician in health, but also in looking at employment at the Office for National Statistics. He is someone who can genuinely crunch the numbers and knows what he's talking about. And he's looked at the numbers in terms of payroll jobs. So there's lots of figures, aren't there? There's employment rates, there's available employment, there's unemployment, there's benefits claimants. There's lots of different kinds of figures. You kind of have to mash it all together to get a big picture. But he looked at payroll jobs, the jobs that are actually being paid. Staff jobs, payroll jobs, they have dropped by 109,000 in the month of May. It's the biggest monthly fall since lockdowns. That's 274,000 fewer jobs than a year ago. And it really does look like it's part of the economy, it's confidence, it's also the national insurance hikes, minimum wage hikes as well. And I certainly know a friend of mine who runs a small business was saying normally, and in the IT world, and he was saying that normally, when you're trying to, in recent years, you're trying to hire people have got other jobs. It's basically been an employee market. Yep. And now it's an employer's market. And it's really noticeable that when people are applying for jobs, they're not coming from another company and wanting a step up. They haven't had a job since last year. But that's quite telling.
This is what happens when ideology clashes with reality. The ideology of persecuting businesses by way of Rachel Reeves' £20 billion jobs tax back in the budget last year. And the consequence of that, as we are now seeing in real life, is that, guess what? Employers decide that if they're going to be taxed more, they simply won't invest in people and their businesses as much. Who knew?
I mean,
who knew that would happen? It's an obvious consequence.
Literally everybody, and everyone warned them, but they did it anyway.
Reeves, yes. And the left, the Labour front bench now will be saying, look, this is just a blip. If you look at the last 2 or 3 months' worth of unemployment figures, this is now a trend. This is now a direction of travel. Let us also not forget the Labour Party, Labour governments have never, ever left unemployment lower at the end of their office.
Not once. Not once, absolutely.
Labour isn't working, remember that?
Listen, I'm just going to bring you some breaking news. We'll try and get some more details on this. So reports of an attack at a school in Austria, and reports claiming that 7 people, possibly including children, have been killed. We don't know any more details than that at the current time that I can report to you. As soon as we get more information, I'm going to bring it to you here. But reports of an attack and several dead in an attack on a school in Austria. I think a lot of us will jump to conclusions.
Let's not do that.
Let's wait and see what facts we have on that. But listen, I do want to still hear from you on particularly on the winter fuel allowance cut. Should the Chancellor apologise to pensioners? Obviously tying in that the whole the economy and where we are. Give us a call 0344 499 1000. Let's also talk about what we are spending money on, and it does appear nuclear power plants. Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, your friend and mine, so on each other's Christmas card lists, I can't tell you. He sends me 5 Christmas cards because he loves me so much. But today he's committing £14.2 billion to building 2 giant reactors at Sizewell in Suffolk. They are capable of producing electricity for 6 million homes. Even if the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, it's almost like they're quite reliable, these nuclear power plants. Now, I applaud this. This is a good thing. We need to keep the lights on. The reason why we need to build more nuclear reactors to keep the lights on is because of this reliance on solar and wind. And we're going to have solar and wind, and when they're not working, we're going to have the nuclear power. We could just have the nuclear power and it would be easier and cheaper. The question is the amount of money that's going in, and we'll talk to Donica McCarthy later on. Take a deep breath, everybody. This is in addition to £3.6 billion from the last Tory government. It means that Sizewell C is going to receive a total of almost 18 billion quid in public money. More to follow, obviously. But bearing in mind that the one that's currently being built at the moment, which is Hinkley Point C in Somerset, that is already likely to cost, they think now, 50 billion quid before it opens, probably 2031. I mean, Hinkley won't open way any time before that. extraordinary. Hinkley Point C is more than 4 times more expensive on a pound per megawatt basis than the average nuclear power plant built in South Korea. I mean, we just simply can't do this stuff efficiently, and for many, many different reasons, partly because we don't build enough of them.
Well, and maybe if we hadn't not opened a nuclear power plant since 1995...
That might be part of
which
the
Keir
issue.
Starmer was trumpeting on X this morning. I'm thinking, hang on a sec, wasn't your party in power until 2010? Wasn't it Nick Clegg of the Liberal Democrats that said in 2010 we shouldn't bother with nuclear because we won't get a nuclear power station open until at least 2020?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, 2022, I think he was saying, but he was laughing. Like, of course you don't. That's not going to solve our energy problem. And this is a problem. The basic problem we've got is we don't have a lot of manufacturing expertise anymore. We, instead of just taking the expertise from another country like France or South Korea, great, you're building loads of these. Can you come over and do it here? And we get the Chinese involved briefly for some reason. What the hell was anyone thinking there? I mean, that's properly insane. They chop and change the different policies all the time. But also we are abjectly terrible at long-term planning. Yeah. And if you want to do energy, you need long-term planning.
And you know why? It's because I'm afraid politicians, as we all know, have a very, very short shelf life, particularly those on the front bench.
Yep.
And I suspect it's because they only want to announce things, particularly with public money, that they themselves will get the credit
benefit from. But again, they don't. But again, I also hold the civil servants to blame for this. I mean, I tell you who's been doing the rounds a lot lately. Simon Case. He's on all the Sunday morning shows, the former cabinet secretary, the one who just sat there while everyone was having parties in the middle of lockdown. But apparently he didn't do anything wrong. He was unable to do his job or appear at the COVID inquiry, but apparently completely able to do telly now, so it's obviously fine. And again, these civil servants, they should be sitting there with cabinet ministers, with the Prime Minister, with the Chancellor, and saying, seriously, you need to do this because we won't have any energy and the lights are going to go out in 2029 if you don't. And they don't do that.
So is it a rare moment of applause for Ed Miliband? Bearing in mind that this is not new news. And of course, the previous government said that Sizewell obviously needed to be rebuilt and expanded and so on. But the question is, it's £14 billion. Hang on, let's go back to that black hole again. Where's the 14 billion coming from?
Exactly. Well, also, here's another area where we don't do long-term planning and where we have to spend an awful lot of money, and that is defence. The NATO chief, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, he was in the UK yesterday. He was giving a speech at Chatham House, a meeting with the PM, but this is the starkest warning ever. He said he was really impressed by the Prime Minister's strategic defence review unveiled last week, which doesn't even come close to hitting even, I mean, the 2.5% of the GDP is going to be, is tentative in the next few years. 3% is just an ambition, and that would be not for basically another 10 years. Way below the 5% that NATO is calling for and America is calling for. But he said, very, very stark, British people better learn to speak Russian if we don't massively ramp up defence spending. That is the reality, isn't it?
No, I think that's an absolute load of old nonsense. I think this spectre of Russia invading Britain is another COVID.
Russia isn't going to invade Britain.
No,
that's not what they're talking about.
It's another COVID. It's another climate change. Don't we think
really think that?
Yeah, I do. I think the governments love to put us in a state of fear because that means they can control us and they can tax us more.
I agree with you on that. However, they also don't want to have to spend a load of money on defence rather than spending on
Julia,
the nurses and stuff that they get the cred for.
Shock horror. The Secretary General of NATO wants more money to be spent on his.
The Secretary General of NATO probably is privy to an awful lot of information. Look, we have seen in recent months there is clear, even with Keir Starmer, who we expected to perhaps be a little bit softer than the Tories on the issue of Ukraine and dealing with Russia. Not so. Not so. And I think that's telling you. I think they are seeing an awful lot of what's going on. I mean, but is the Polish government ramping this up, or the Baltic states ramping this up, or is Finland ramping this up? Because they're all expressing the same concern.
Maybe the big consideration should be if we don't all ramp up, then the United States might leave NATO. I mean, Trump has threatened to do that because he said, "I'm not going to keep propping you guys up."
Why should he? Why should America keep propping us up?
Of course not.
Exactly. So we need to do. Well, why should taxpayers in America be funding our defence? Do you think we shouldn't be defending Ukraine?
Do I think we shouldn't be defending Ukraine?
Do you think we shouldn't help Ukraine?
I think that there should be more accountability to the money trail, frankly.
Always.
The billions, well, there isn't.
Always.
There's no transparency whatsoever.
A huge amount of corruption in war.
And I also think that whether it's
but that's not the question I asked
Boris Johnson or Keir Starmer, I think they are grandstanding over Ukraine.
Prime Ministers like to do that.
They love it.
That wasn't the question I asked you.
Yeah, I think we should, but then I think that Ukraine...
We should be funding Ukraine and helping their military efforts.
But I think the way to do it is simply for Ukraine to enter NATO.
But Turkey and others wouldn't let Ukraine.
Because then the problem goes away.
No, actually, I think under the rules of NATO, you actually can't join if you're in a conflict.
Yeah, OK, well, they should have
So
gone.
okay, I think they should have been allowed to NATO in advance. Other people would say Russia would say that was provocation. But we should be helping them. If we're going to help them, we can't even help ourselves. We don't even have an army or sufficient
Well, we can't even protect
resources.
our own borders.
We can't protect... Exactly, a point I've made a million times. But do you not think, therefore, we need to ramp up our own defences so we can help our allies, which is which we have signed up to under NATO treaty?
I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't increase defence spending. I think it's appalling that we have spent less and less and less in real terms over the last 20 years. What my concern is when you've got people like the Secretary-General of NATO almost threatening the public by saying you're going to be speaking Russian in 10 years if we don't spend more money on my train set. That's what I object to.
I'm not. I mean, I do understand that, but it is a fair point that, I mean, you know, again, we're as some very, very senior military figures in Britain have been pointing out, you know, we are in a sort of appeasement territory in 1937 right now. In terms of appeasement territory, what do you make of these Foreign Office staff who've done one of those ghastly, pompous... Well, I mean, we were students and people listened to us then, and now we work at the Foreign Office and we're civil servants. We're going to write to the government and say we're terribly unhappy with the policy we've got on Gaza. I don't know why they are, because it's basically Hamas appeasement quite a lot of the time. And that we're unhappy about it, and we want we disagree over Gaza policy. They're accusing the government of potential complicity in Israel's conduct in Gaza. There's a staff letter seen by the BBC. They probably wrote it, the BBC. And it's been sent to the Foreign Secretary David Lammy last month. Interestingly, the response came back from the two most senior civil servants at the Foreign Office, Ollie Robbins, boo, hiss, Nick Dyer. But they basically said, look, if you disagree, your ultimate recourse is to resign. This is an honourable course.
Brilliant.
Yeah, resign. Seriously, guys.
Just do that. And can we extend that to Border Force and the Home Office as well?
And David Lammy.
And David Lammy. All of the civil servants that have blocked successive attempts to try and control our borders. We know that comes down to a lot of the civil servants' activism. I think they should reread their employment contracts, Julia, because the word civil servant has the word servant in it.
It's really that simple.
Yes.
No one
do as you're told.
You're working in government. Literally, no one asks you. Their argument is always it's illegal. Again, they've got this. You know, you're only operating under British law.
Do as you're told, or try and work in the private sector and see how you get on.
Yeah, good luck with that. Let's just also finally, just in this section, let's talk about Greta Thunberg and her little freedom flotilla. And their help for the huge amount of aid they were able to take with their aid flotilla symbolic amount of aid. Symbolic amount of aid they took on their little boat to Gaza. They didn't get to Gaza. They were intercepted by the Israelis, given some sandwiches and water. They were very happy about it. Israeli officials said they were going to make them watch that video, the 45-minute video, was shown to many journalists, compiled of basically Hamas footage and things of the reality of what actually happened on October the 7th. Since these are the many people like my guest yesterday, Yvonne Ridley, and others who basically it's equivalent to Holocaust denial. They can't deny it happened. No, it's been overhyped, these phrases like that. They refused to watch the video. They have been taken to the airport. They are being deported. I thought it was very interesting that Greta made an appeal to the Swedish people and the Swedish government and asked for pressure to be put on. The Swedish government went, nah, your problem, not ours.
Well, and actually, love. Even further, I think one of the ministers in Sweden said, actually, because of your actions, you have now clogged up the phone lines of government and embassies, stopping genuine people that do need help from getting through to the support that they need. So well done, Greta.
It's all about Greta.
Can I just suggest that we employ the Israelis to help us with our border problems?
Oh, yes. I mean...
Problem solved.
Absolutely.
Give them the 500 million a year, not the French.
Absolutely.